I always do that. I don't know why I always grab my face like that. I'm worried I got spittle in the corners or something. Anywho, more on this idea of reclaiming the language of God or the vocabulary of God. Mentioned before that I think we need to leave the baggage of these words and the trauma of our past behind so that we can have a conversation with the appropriate language, right? And whether you want to talk about the universe or God or Jesus Christ or, you know, whatever kind of languages you need to use, I think we can all say there's baggage for some of us in all these directions, right? You might have baggage in a more spiritual versus religious way or vice versa. But ultimately, there is this element of ties to the past and hurt and disappointment and of people letting us down. And we attach those disappointments, the feelings of disappointments and betrayal sometimes and neglect and all these things. And we put that on God because of the language attached, because the baggage attached to the words. And instead of doing that, or now that we are aware of it, and I say we a lot, but I just assume that if I'm doing this, other people are doing it too, right? I'm not trying to judge anyone or tell people what to do. That's not I just assume that if me, then likely others too, right? And so if it's helpful to talk about, or it's helpful to get people's, their creative imaginations going in these directions, right? What do I think? Where are these ideas coming from? Where did I get this? Any of that. It's just good. It's good for us to do that. It's good for me to do that. So I assume it's good for us to do that. So if it works for you, or if it makes sense, pick it up and take it with you. And if it doesn't, just leave it right here and keep on walking. You don't have to use any of it. But I think we need to be able to have these conversations. We need to talk about God. We need to be able to talk about forgiveness and spirituality and righteousness and some of these ideas without all these attachments to guilt and shame and suffering and the pain of the past inflicted in the name of these things versus what these things really are. Yeah, and I think it ties too to a lot of disappointment in the current is the word I want to, in the current modern kind of time frame here. Like these narratives in certain contexts, the ways we were taught them as kids, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, whatever it is, we were taught these things in a way that doesn't seem to overlay over society and culture now, right? When you think about the story of Jesus in the Gospels and the fact that the word gospel is supposed to mean the good news, and then you look around and you see more homelessness and more pain and more suffering than we've seemingly ever had before in a society that's richer and richer with better and better technologies. And it's not to say that people don't need to take some responsibilities for the things in their lives. Of course we all do. But there's something, there's a separation there. There's a suffering and a separation attached to that I think needs addressing. I think the pain and the screaming out that comes from that is because we need to look at it. We really need to attend to it and see what these things are. But we need to be able to talk about it with the right language. And the right language is the language of the Spirit. And the right language is the language of God. And the right language is the language of community and forgiveness. And so some of that forgiveness, I think, applies to these words, right? We need to forgive the words in a way. And it's not accurate. That's not really what I mean, but it's kind of, I think all these things are applicable in more than one realm, right? So if forgiving someone who's hurt me, then forgiving the words that are attached to that hurt is also useful, right? The forgiveness of the person is me letting go of the past, because I can't reach towards God. I can't reach towards the kingdom of God that's at hand and bring it to here. I can't reach towards that while I'm still clinging to my identity in my hurt, right? In the past, in the anger, in the revenge cycle, in whatever it is, in that outcrying for revenge or pain or whatever. If I stay there, I cannot reach towards God's love and bring the kingdom of heaven to here now. And that's ultimately what we should be reaching for. And regardless, again, this is why we need the language back, because if you hear those words and you get all riled up, I hear you. I'm there too. I get it. But we have to be able to take these words back, because that's what we need to do. We need to have forgiveness. We need to be able to look to the people and the things that have hurt us and forgive them for real, and not because they deserve it, as we don't deserve it, right? When we're honest with ourselves about the people we've hurt, regardless of how high or low the pain threshold was for these incidents, we've all hurt someone in some way. And when you feel that guilt and you approach it with an honest, open heart and mind, you'll understand why forgiveness is so important. You'll understand why not clinging to the past things is so important. And you'll understand why the model of Christ makes so much sense and is so able to overlap in these sort of, fractal layers where you keep looking deeper and deeper, and it keeps on making more and more sense at every layer. But you can't get there either until you humble yourself and you say, I'm not the smartest thing in the world. Let me put my ego aside. Let me decide to say, I believe in an external being that's greater and better than me in all possible ways. And I'm going to try to seek those things out based on my understanding and feeling of experience in the world, right? In all these ways, in being loved and in not being loved, in loving another and in not knowing how to love another, in accepting grace and not know how to give grace or accept, in all these ways, right? But the entry point is humbling yourself and saying, I am not the supreme knowledge center. I do not know everything. I cannot experience everything. I am in my mastery of anything. There is only evidence in my stupidity and everything else, right? So anyways, we need the right language. We need to take it back, the story and the words, and we need to come up, we need to re-understand these things through the right lenses, through the context of who and what they were spoken to and about in the time they were spoken, and what those things translate to today. Where do we see the same things that we label with different words, and where can we apply the spirit of what Christ is continually calling us to do in these stories, right? Versus the literal, because I don't know that it's easy to do that. And maybe I'm wrong. I mean, maybe that's not the case, but it seems like the case to me. Anyway, we need to reclaim the words, and we need to be humble enough to say, I don't know everything, and I'm willing to believe, right? This entry point of I'm not supreme, right? There's something greater, and it's really there. And once we can get to that, that's the entry point to all these other things. So we need to take the language back, because the hurt and the shame and our unwillingness to forgive is preventing us from being our best selves, from loving as much as we could, from accepting love as best we could, from being our best parent, our version of ourselves as parents, as husbands, as wives, as lovers, as all these things. We can't be those things to the best of our ability until we are able to love and be loved ultimately. And we can't get there without God's love, and we can't get there without taking back the language and forgiving the words and the trauma attached from the past. Have an awesome day.